Last year was unique because this had really never been done. There were really never this many gender people in one room talking about things that everyone had been dealing with. We definitely wanted to build on those conversations that happened last year. But we wanted to do it bigger. We wanted it to be better. We wanted to have a diversity of voices in the room. The driving question for us this year is, how do we achieve gender equality in international development?
This summit comes at such a timely period because it's showing the rest of us in the space how leaders in development like FHI are looking at gender, thinking about gender, analyzing gender, and how people are responding to that.
One of the big impediments to working on gender equality that we often hear is that it's not our job to change culture. Sometimes when we hear that we're not supposed to be changing culture, what it really means is we just don't believe that we should be making things better for women and girls. And I would say that if that's the reasoning behind it, that you're probably not doing development right.
And this idea of gender synchronization, of working with everybody, really reflects the recognition that everyone needs to shift because everybody is participating in a system of values and roles.
Peace Corps volunteers see gender up close and personal. They could have been feminist in the United States, and then they get to their country and they see that these issues are really grounded in rigid gender norms that constrain boys, girls, women, and men from participating fully in development. So how can we address that?
For years, we had been talking about gender and women's status, and, quite honestly, it was falling quite flat, and we weren't getting to the root of the issue. And so we tried to experiment with the language of power, and this really transformed our programming. It gives people opportunity for change and hope.
People are looking at this as much more a power relationship, and that isn't limited to gender. It is infused in racial politics, it's infused in cultural differences, and so if you begin to look at it through a power lens, you can begin to encompass all sorts of other inequalities that are fundamental to human progress.
You have to engage men and boys if you want to see gender equality happen. We're asking for there to be shifts in power relationships. That means that men need to adjust their lives as well.
I've traveled thousands of miles to attend this important summit.
We're thrilled that Fikiri Nzoya Senga was able to make it here from Burundi. He provided a male voice for women's empowerment that is not often heard in this context.
I come from a country where, despite the efforts of the government, women are still considered somehow as second-class citizens. A country where women cannot even inherit from their parents. A country where thousands of girls are forced to leave school because of early pregnancies and early marriages.
Showing that men and boys can have a positive influence on gender as a whole is really inspiring to me, and I think that's the future of that we're going to be living in 5, 10, 20 years.
In defending women's rights, men are actually preserving their own dignity.
This year wasn't only gender experts who wanted to come, it was the monitoring and evaluation experts, it was the program officers, it's people who are doing research. I think that reflects the recognition that it's really everyone's responsibility to work on gender in an organization, not just the gender advisor or the gender expert.
One of the things that we discussed around gender equality was how do we make it practical and how do we make it attainable for a number of individuals across the organization.
Well, I'm very excited about the Gender Lounge. I really like the opportunity for people to discuss, not just to listen.
We cannot change norms. We cannot change culture overnight.
I think that's one of the things that I've struggled with is how do we kind of work at chipping away at that shame? How do we work at making it so that it's okay to say, I, have experienced violence and I'm going to report it and I'm going to talk about it.
The reality is that we need to invest more time in understanding the processes on the ground and engaging to get that ownership and buy-in and make it sustainable. So that's one thing.
It was great. The diversity at my table, I mean, we had 2 people from Africa, 1 from Bangladesh. You had people who worked in health, 1 who worked in wildlife issues, people who worked in international education exchanges. Even though we came from such different backgrounds professionally and otherwise, we ended up speaking a common language.
I'm very pleased and honored to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Catherine Russell, Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues at the U.S. State Department.
This is an exciting time. I think everyone feels that, to be working on gender equality in the international development area. After all, 2015 is a major year for development and for women and girls. We're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the UN World Conference in Beijing and shining a spotlight on those 11 powerful words that then First Lady Hillary Clinton said so famously, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. We believe strongly, and I think the evidence supports this, that if countries recognize and support the rights of women and girls in their country, those countries will ultimately be more stable, more prosperous, and that is in the strategic interest of the United States.
We're looking for new ways of getting people to talk about issues that are on everyone's mind. The lightning talks, or these TED-style talks, just felt like, it made gender cool again.
If we wait for women to become women to address gender equality, it is much too late.
The biggest risk for women in India who are living with HIV is their marital status. So most women get the infection by being married.
Over 100 countries now have national laws on domestic violence. Most countries have some kind of national commission or national plan on violence against women. So we've clearly changed the public discourse.
Even investing in men, while I think it's an important conversation, I think boys are actually where the opportunities are.
Those are women that I really do admire. It was great to get a chance to hear their work and hear what's going on, the different breakthroughs that are happening.
I think bringing together such important and critical players in this field is really valuable. It energizes everybody because they see the progress that's being made and they understand where they fit into the bigger picture, and I think that's tremendously helpful.
I think it will help me to be a more informed strategic partner and help me to ask different questions of my partners about the approaches that they're taking to tackle the issues facing women and girls.
I'm personally very excited about this panel, a panel comprised of representatives from donor institutions as well as others who are closely working with donors.
Why is it that we're not seeing the level of support that we need for local indigenous women's organizations?
Okay, let me really talk to African women activists and get a different viewpoint, and then put money into those organizations to strengthen the ability of those organizations to deliver.
There's 2 ways that bilateral donors can get around this issue of the administrative burden. So one is by funding women's funds, who are there because they can absorb large amounts of money and they've got great links to the grassroots. And then the second is the example of the MDG3 and the Flow Fund that the Dutch government have been such leaders on.
What do you think is that linchpin that really gets gender moving throughout an agency from top to bottom? And by that, is it incentive funds? Is it required gender policy?
I think the Gender Equality Act is what stands out now in the UK government, because it was made law in 2014. So from that moment on, all our development assistance, including humanitarian aid, there's a requirement that proportionately, but gender equality, we must promote gender equality in whatever we do. But it's certainly created a very different incentive structure within the organisation and within non-traditional sectors.
We actually are working at USAID mirroring the way we look at the programs we do overseas. So if you think we work at the individual, the institutional, and the attitude levels, when we're working in countries to increase the decision-making of women and girls, we also are working that way at USAID.
African women are incredibly entrepreneurial. Otherwise, our continent would not have survived for this length of time with the number of challenges. But it's not every girl who wants to run her own business. And if we have all African women running small and medium-sized businesses, where do we find our scientists? Where do we find our chemical engineers? People are more comfortable with that idea of economic security than they are about rights.
This is also a really nice opportunity for us to make connections and sort of push that learning outside of this building and into the world where the issues are still very real.
How do we get everybody to have this discovery about gender? How do we jolt the world into this kind of awareness? How can we generate that kind of instinctive analysis and desire for gender justice in everyone?
I challenge everyone sitting in this room to think about the gender roles that you play in your lives and the responsibilities related to those roles.
So we're standing at the brink of a new era of gender equality within the realm of global development, and we are all, I think, here so excited.
I am absolutely thrilled to see such a huge turnout today. It's fantastic that so many people have come and want to spend the day talking about these issues. It's really great.